In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to take a look at. Does Kaprizov want to end up in Chicago by his next contract? A big rumor has dropped from one of the Chicago beat writers. Plus, could we see a trade between the Montreal Canadiens and the Los Angeles Kings? We're going to take a look at the possibility as well. What's going on with Jeremy Swayman? Is there any updates? What could it lead to? Some injury updates, including the New York Rangers and Ottawa Senators. Apparently, there's also some speculation about some tidbits on Perfertti and the Jets and how negotiations went. Maybe a long-term deal was never going to work. And are the Bruins looking to keep head coach Jim Montgomery? All that and more coming up next. Well, welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to take a look at here today. Let's first start with a couple of injury updates. We have some other news around the league as well, including some signings and some updates on coaching and a few other quick pieces here as well. The New York Rangers didn't have some great pieces of news here. Apparently, Ryan Lindgren was injured, and he is going to be out for what they're describing as a few weeks. So certainly not going to be likely ready for the start of the season. At least that they're concerned he won't be. Hard to say exactly, but Lindgren injury is not going to be, obviously a good thing. He plays a lot of minutes, plays a big role, often partnered with Adam Fox. So you're probably going to see guys like, Jones, Mackey, etc. get an elevated role. So we'll see there. And Artemi Panarin also was hurt and is listed as day-to-day. I know in Toronto, Austin Matthews left practice yesterday. I haven't seen any updates there, but he did leave early and was dealing with something. I don't know if there's any level of seriousness or anything like that. Ottawa, some injury updates as well. Artem Zub has not skated for a few days, and Travis Green finally today did acknowledge that he is dealing with something. There's some sort of a lower body injury that he is struggling with. We don't know exactly what it is, but it's certainly not good news. Hopefully it's nothing that'll take too long to heal up. Zub is an important kind of glue guy, if you will, for that Sens decor. In the last year or two, their record when he can't play is actually really not good, especially with their restructured defense this year. They're going to rely a lot on Zub and Jensen to play a lot on our right side. And the last they play, you're going to have either guys playing on their weak side or Travis Hamonic playing more, which either way will certainly weaken their decor. So certainly not something they really want to deal with, but at the same time, they get to see what this is and what kind of timelines we're dealing with here for Zub. There was some concerns recently around Linus Ullmark, but he returned today to practice. He's totally fine. It really wasn't a big deal. He had been still skating every day, but he was skating on his own, so it wasn't always being covered by the media. So they weren't aware of everything that was going on, but it was just something minor that he was dealing with. They gave him a couple of maintenance days. There is a possibility Linus will get into their next preseason game, which I believe is coming up tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. So certainly promising news there. Ridley Gregg also in their last exhibition game against the Leafs last night did also leave after the first period. Didn't return. He had taken it looked like a slew foot, to be honest. A bit of a dirty play from Holmberg of the Leafs, and you could see him on the bench getting like his mouth looked like he might need some dental work because there was a stick that came up during that altercation as well. But later we found out that what had happened with Ridley was that he apparently was complaining of a headache during the intermission. And so, because when he went down to the ice, you couldn't really tell for sure if he hit his head, but obviously with concussions being such a serious thing, it was more that's just a preventative type thing. If he's complaining of a headache, just keep him out just in case. That way you don't make anything worse. But he was at practice today and seemed okay and did speak to the media. So I think they've cleared him, but they just wanted to be precautionary. So Sens fans, when it comes to Gregg and Ullmark, you can rest assured that everything's okay. Josh Norris hasn't played an exhibition game yet, but has been a full participant in all the practices, doing a lot of battle drills. So I really don't think there's a lot to worry with there. Travis Green has gone on that they have a plan as far as integrating him back in, and he will play exhibition games soon enough, they say. I just don't think they want to, expose him to getting hurt any sooner than they need to. And they're also going to want to play him when he can play with his normal line mates. So, again, I don't think there's really any reason to panic on any of those cases. The only player I think Sens should be somewhat concerned with right now, and it's only minor at the present time, is Artem Zub. If it turns out to be a longer term thing, well, that could be a problem considering how solid he is defensively. So a signing in Philly as well. They turned one of their PTOs into a contract. A 25-year-old European goaltender Eetu Makiniemi gets a 1-year deal at league minimum. So again, went to camp on a PTO, ended up getting a contract. There's also reports today from thefourthperiod.com and Dave Pagnotta saying that the Winnipeg Jets technically never offered Cole Perfertti a long-term deal. We know those negotiations were obviously very long and drawn out. Obviously missed the first few days of training camp before we come to terms on a 2-year deal. Perfertti himself has been very vocal about the fact that he would have liked to have seen a long-term deal. He really likes the team. He really likes the organization and was quite happy to sign long-term. But according to Pagnotta, the offer was never really on the table. So a part of those negotiations, part of why they maybe drug on so long was that Perfertti's side was looking for that and insisting on it and eventually caved to their demands. But I find that funny from a Jets perspective because obviously it's fair to say that he's a big part of the future of this team. Maybe he hasn't broken through to the point that, he's going to be a superstar, but he's going to be a very good player. I don't think there's much hesitancy around making that kind of statement. This Jets team has had difficulty keeping players. So for somebody who loves it there and has been thriving and appears to be a huge part, why wouldn't you want to make that long-term offer? The price is only going to go up. If he continues to develop and continues to get better in a year or two time, his price tag is going to go much higher. So why wouldn't you want to do that? I'm really confused by the strategy there by the Winnipeg Jets. So interesting news on that front. The Boston Bruins, of course, have had very much lots of success, at least in the regular season, under head coach Jim Montgomery. And it appears as though management is very interested in extending him as on his contract to extend his time as Bruins coach. And there is an expectation that it's a good chance, not a guarantee, that it might be done before the start of the season. For coaches going into their last season of their contract, sometimes it can be it's not a great thing to feel like you might be a lame duck coach, right? So usually you try to make these decisions ahead of time just to get it out of the way. It's not a distraction. There's no, real reason at this point, I think, for the Bruins to really consider a change at this point. I mean, yes, they've had 2 really good regular seasons under Montgomery. Have they gotten the playoff success they were hoping for? No. But at least they won around last year. It's not like it was a complete failure. Yes, a lot of teams besides winning the Stanley Cup look at it as being that a failure. But at the same time, I don't think there's really many options right now for them to upgrade. And the regular season success speaks for itself. They can get over the hump in the playoffs. That's a completely different animal. It does fall on the coach to some degree for sure. I know in the first year that he was head coach 2 years ago when they had a historic regular season, I do think to some degree that first round loss, to some of it, I think he would have liked to have made some different decisions, and I think he learned from that, which allowed them to get a little bit further in last year's playoffs, and the Panthers were just a better team. So we'll see how things go. With the Boston Bruins, though, to me, the much bigger problem or bigger situation on their plate right now is Jeremy Swayman. It still seems to be status quo, no real progress on a deal. Reporters talking today seem to think that the next real major pressure point is the beginning of the regular season, and that maybe that was a much bigger pressure point all along than the beginning of training camp. Clearly, though, players who miss training camp, not always, because there are exceptions, and there are some guys that have missed camp and jumped in late and taken off and had a great year. But more often than not, that doesn't happen. And for goaltenders especially, it's a unique position. I just don't know if that's going to be real good, for him to miss the entire camp, if it leads to that. In the Bruins preseason game, yesterday, Korpisalo and I think Bussy shared the spotlight. Korpisalo was okay. I think he only faced 7 shots, but he did stop them. Didn't give up an early goal like he did oftentimes in Ottawa last year. So we'll see. I just don't know if they really want to put all their betting eggs, so to speak, in that basket. But, like I said, if we get to the beginning of the year and Swayman is not signed, you're going to hear more and more about the trade rumors popping up because obviously, you start to get concerned about the relationship, right? And whether or not if the Bruins don't want to pay him, maybe they'll start asking for a trade. You have to think that Swayman is not only trying to set the market for goalies, but he's also, I think trying to prove a point here based on how everything went last year. And, at the same time, I also think it's fair to say that Swayman has not played a full campaign. He was in a tandem with Linus Ullmark, and they were one of the best in the NHL, and they both were really good. Last year, it was clear that Swayman was a bit better, so he get to play in the playoffs, and certainly looking to be the guy now. But I can understand the Bruins' perspective without him having a full season as being the clear-cut number one, why they might be reluctant to go to like $10 million or something. So, how this is going to go is really difficult to say. Again, like we've talked about, there's been speculation out there. It could lead to a trade. I can't say that it won't, but it's also too early to say for sure that it will. But I think the longer this goes, the frustration is going to set in. My concern, like anybody, especially for Bruins fans, would be that this relationship has already had some issues that happened, with arbitration and everything last year. You just hope that it doesn't get to the point where it really turns sour and that Swayman prefers a trade, because that would be bad. You go from having one of the best goalie teams in the league to having neither one. That just wouldn't be a good scenario at all. Now, as I mentioned, a couple of rumors we want to take a look at. Well, one, we talked yesterday about two things, and I know some of the viewers started pointing it out, and you know what? It does make some sense. We talked about the fact that Montreal and Christian Dvorak is kind of getting pushed out here by guys like Oliver Kapanen. You have to think, maybe Owen Beck might be in that conversation as well, but Dvorak is in the final year of his contract. Very likely that he was going to be moving on from the Habs either after this year or during this year. We know there's no long-term future for him in Montreal, at least that's as of right now, and that I would not expect anything to change on that front. And we also know that the Kings are in the market for a center, but preferably somebody who's going to play bottom six. Christian Dvorak right now is making $4.45 million. Nobody's going to want that contract as a bottom six, fourth line center. It's just that simple. However, Montreal does have one retention spot left, and if you look at the players that they're likely to move this year, with Dvorak being one, David Savard being one, and Armia being one, those are your most three likely Hab players to get traded this year, because they probably don't have long-term futures with the Canadiens. They're all veterans, and they're all on expiring deals. You have to think, okay, Montreal's going to have to analyze this and be like, okay, which player do we need to retain salary on to increase the value? Because when you retain money, you do get better return. It's just as simple as that, because you're doing the other team a favor. David Savard has the potential to be a very highly sought after defenseman at the trade deadline. So the part that might complicate this is they might feel like retaining on Savard might be better bang for their buck at the deadline than it would be on Dvorak or Armia earlier in the campaign. And if that's the way they feel, and they won't retain on Dvorak, the only way for a team to acquire him at a lower salary is for a third team to come involved and do the retention, which is only going to be one retained instead of double retained. And then on top of that, you're paying extra to move him along because you have a third team involved. It might not be feasible. So at the end of the day, with Montreal's already retaining salary on two other contracts that are still active, it does complicate this type of trade. I see the connection here. The Kings want a center. They have a center. He kind of fits the mold of the type of center that they would want. Obviously the Kings are trying to win now, so it would be an upgrade. It might be a more expensive player than they would otherwise maybe look at, but they'd have to send something to Montreal probably in return instead of just a late pick or something like that. But, would that work out? I don't know, because it really is going to boil down to how Montreal feels about salary retention. If they don't want to retain on him and they want to save that last spot for Savard, nobody's taking Dvorak at $4.45 million. That's a major, major issue. So, yes, both of these things are likely to happen. Dvorak likely not to be in Montreal too much longer. The Kings likely looking for a center. There could be a connection there, but that's going to be the big factor on whether or not it even has a shot at happening at all. Now, the other big juicy rumor that came out today was Mark Lazarus, who of course is a Chicago writer for The Athletic, saying that there was a lot of rumors and a lot of chatter around the draft floor in June at the Sphere in Vegas. On the draft floor, there was a lot of talk that Kirill Kaprizov, star player for the Wild, wanted to end up in Chicago. Now, he did clarify those comments and saying that the rumor was more about when his contract is up, not necessarily that he's looking to move right now, not that he's demanding a trade or anything of that, but Kaprizov is a free agent in 2026. Now, if Minnesota knows that he won't, and I don't know, I'm not saying they know this, I'm just saying if they did know that he didn't want to re-sign and that he wanted to move, then obviously that could lead to a trade sooner. Probably not, I would think probably not this year, but the more contract he has, the more value that he's going to have. Now, Chicago, I'm not sure exactly what the appeal is there. Clearly, Artemi Panarin went to Chicago when he first came to the NHL. They have a lot of up-and-coming players. I don't know exactly, what his rationale is and why he would want to go there. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's not. They're building something really good there. You get to play with a guy like Connor Bedard. Very exciting, very intriguing. But at the same time, it's just not something you would expect a star player to hear. Now, in another year or two, they're going to be even better. So I kind of get the appeal. But how anxious is he for that, to make that happen? That's the questionable part that we don't really know the answer to, except for what Lazarus is saying by the end of his contract. So maybe he's not sure that he wants to re-sign in Minnesota. Minnesota's gone through a tough cap crunch. They haven't been overly competitive. Chicago's an up-and-coming team. Maybe that's the appeal there. Either way, the fact that we're hearing rumors and speculation that he may not want to be in Minnesota beyond the end of his contract is some pretty big news. Like I said, this guy is a star player, a player that Minnesota had to wait a really long time to get out of Russia and come over to North America and sign. And then they had to extend him after that, and that was a pretty tough negotiation from what I recall as well. So, for Minnesota, like that would be such a big blow if they lost this guy. Or if he either forced a trade or walked as a UFA at the end of the contract. That would be a major, major blow. Trading star players like this is not easy to win. It is not at all. It can happen. You can do well. You can get a good haul. But a lot of times it's really, really tough. The team getting the best player in a trade often wins the trade. And that's just the way it is. That's just a fact. But, it's interesting here to say that this could be a possibility. There's definitely going to be a story that we're going to have to watch and follow. Like I said, Lazarus did go on to kind of clarify his comments because some of the stuff that's been floating around on social media kind of got maybe blown out of proportion a little bit. But the fact that there's interest there and there's some doubt that he wants to stay in Minnesota is very, very interesting. In Chicago, of all teams, like they could be stacked here in a couple of years if some of these top guys, like I said, the better these teams get and the more young talent they have, they're going to have more interest in other top talent wanting to play with them as well. And you could see some teams really kind of accelerate their rebuilds and move ahead faster than you might think they would. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on the story, see what we learn about it. Hard to say what turns out to be accurate or what actually happens down the road, but it would be a major, major blow for the Wild if they lost this player, regardless if it's UFA or via trade. But if he doesn't want to be in Minnesota beyond the end of his contract, and if they are aware of this, you have to think a trade sooner is a real possibility. So let me know what you think on this Kaprizov to Chicago rumor that popped up today. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.